Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got another great one for you today. Today, we have another listener that called in and said, hey, man, I don't know much about this, but I got some good stories that I'd like to tell, and of course, we had Gunner jump on as quick as possible. So today, we have some great stories from Gunner Crawford. He's based out of Oregon, and he's just kind of been hunting his whole life, but recently just really rekindling it. I want to say, Gunner, thank you so much for reaching out to me, and thank you for coming on the podcast. It was a lot of fun chatting with you. So that being said, guys, I'm not going to dive too deep into anything else, but please do share the podcast with at least one other person today just to help us grow and help us get other listeners to call in and become guests so that we can hear some more great stories. But beyond that, man, we're going to go ahead and get this thing off, and let Gunner tell you some of these stories. All right, Gunner. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just got off work and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm happy you're here. You are, I've said it before on the podcast, my favorite type of person to talk to is someone who's in your case, I'll say an average Joe, right? Because we'll talk about that later. But an average Joe listener who's just got some hunting stories that they want to tell. Like those are the fun ones for me. It's not the giant bulls that people are killing, these industry people. It's the average Joe that I feel I connect with. And so I'm super excited that you reached out to me and we were able to get you here on the podcast, man. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I honestly didn't even expect a message back. I messaged just out of hope that maybe you'd read it, maybe you wouldn't. I didn't know how busy you were. And I was like, man, I got a few stories. I've been racking my brain, since I started listening, and, you'd say, hey, message us in. And I'm like, all right, well, let me get my ducks in an order. Let me find the stories that I want to tell, and then I'll message if I have enough of them. So
I'm glad you're listening to that part. Because, I read every message and everything that comes through. And I do want everyone to call in. Like, I want to grow my listeners for no reason other than more people out there will hear that I want to hear their stories.
Right.
But let's do. We're getting away from things here. We always do. Gunner, why don't you introduce yourself, man? Let the people know who they're going to hear some stories from today.
All right. Well, my name is Gunner. I'm from Oregon, born and raised in Oregon, but joined the military at a high school. I started hunting at a young age. Earliest memory I have, I think I was 5 with my dad.
That's awesome.
Through the deer woods, man. And I'll tell that story, but grew up hunting deer here in Oregon and elk hunting. I didn't do a whole lot of it, but walking around with my dad.
Yeah.
And joined the military out of high school, so I've done some hunting in Georgia. Got out of the Army, followed my ex-wife now around as a Navy spouse. So I've done some hunting in South Carolina and San Diego. So I've been all over the place, but I just moved home a little over a year ago back to Oregon, and I'm looking to get hard back into it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Are you a rifle hunter, bow hunter, both?
So I am a hunter of opportunity. I put in for so this year I put in for my first choice, because in Oregon you get like up to 6 choices per thing, and I put in my first choice as a rifle bull tag. Second choice was a archery elk tag. So it's I'm a hunter of opportunity.
I'm with you. I want to be an archery hunter because I really like archery. But I am not nearly good enough to just only do that. So like when I have the opportunity, I definitely put in for rifle. There's multiple hunts down here in Texas where I've had my bow in one hand and my rifle in the other, being like, well, if something walks up, depending on the distance, I'm setting one of these down.
Oh man, I got to tell you, there's a story on that. I did the same this last year when I moved back to Oregon. I got into kind of a predicament because I should have been doing that and I didn't.
Yeah.
One of my tags overlapped with my other tag, and so I had an archery deer tag and we don't have like a rifle season per se. It's any legal weapon.
Gotcha. Okay.
Season, but I'm elk hunting, so I'm like, you know what? I've hunted hard the first couple weekends of elk, and I really want to get one this year. I've yet to kill my own elk. I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just gonna take out my rifle. I've had elk on my trail camera for days, and I'm going right where they're supposed to be today. And so, I don't even have my bow with me. Like it's at home.
Yeah.
And I took the 4-wheeler. I'm on the wheeler, and I'm headed up. Just riding. I got my gun, in the gun rack, and I'm riding through the field. Because I'm about to park at the base of this field and walk up this ridge, and I have the spot where they're passing there. They're on my trail cam every day. Every day
Yeah.
I'm seeing them at
Yeah.
this within
That's
an
awesome.
hour, time frame. And mind you, I have an elk tag, which is a cow elk tag with this unit, and then I have a buck deer tag for archery. And so I'm riding my 4-wheeler, and I just happened to look to my right, and there's this little forked horn, and just staring right at me. I'm not
Yeah.
one of those, take the biggest buck. First chance coming out, first legal deer, first legal animal. I'm probably going to take it. I want to fill my freezer. I've been hunting for a long time, but I'm still new to hunting. That's what I say. So
Still making mistakes. We all are.
right, man. So I look over, I stop my 4-wheeler. I'm like 20 yards from this deer. And I was like, all right, pull up my rifle, just look through it through the scope, just to know that I could. I'm not going to shoot it, but just to know that I could. Put my rifle back down, get off the 4-wheeler, walk around to the front of the 4-wheeler, pretend I have my bow in my hand, and I fake a draw. He doesn't even move. He's just standing there. And I'm kicking myself for not bringing my bow, knowing that, I have a tag for both. And so, needless to say, I mean, I left him right where he was, called my sister, and I said, hey, she's got a tag, a deer tag. There's a deer in the field. It didn't move when I left it. Come on out. Let's see if you can put a stalk on it or something. And so she ended up coming and getting a shot at her own deer that wasn't that one. Missed it, but that was just a frustrating moment for me because
I bet, man.
I
bet. There's so many lessons learned about like making sure your weapon's on you and the right weapon's on you. I don't know if I've told this story about I may have, but if I haven't, here we go. Elk hunting in Colorado is my first season. It's November, third rifle, and we hiked straight up this mountain. Turns out there's roads everywhere. We probably should have just driven all over the place. But we hiked up this mountain. We saw this giant herd, and we just basically chased after the herd thinking there's snow on the ground. Maybe we'll be able to track them down, and they'll bed at some point. Onslaught of rifle fire just into this herd. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I don't really like rifle hunting because of just the amount of shots I heard. I'm like, where are those all landing? Because they're not all hitting elk. Either way, we don't find any elk. We're hiking around. We're going up, and we're like, okay, it's time to have lunch. Like, this is exhausting. We literally just climbed up 2,000 feet of elevation and in knee-deep snow. We sit down, and we're having lunch, and there's this big rock. It's maybe like 9-10 feet in diameter. And like I set my gun down and I'm walking around it trying to find a good spot to sit down. And I eventually find a spot and I sit down. Bring our sandwiches out there, like bagel sandwiches, frozen rock solid. Like our jaws were aching from chewing on this thing. And I'm sitting there talking with my buddy, and I look over my shoulder, and there's like 30 elk, like 80 yards. I'm like, hell yeah! So then I look down and I'm like, where's my gun? Where's my gun, man? Like, I have no idea. Then I remember I am sitting on the opposite side of the rock from where I set that thing down. So and my buddy did the exact same thing. When I set my gun down, he set his down next to him, and then we walked to the other side of the rock and sat down. So like I crawl over and like I see I have a bull tag, and that's it. So I see 3 bulls run by, bunch of cows, bunch of spikes. I get around, I crawl over to my gun, get up, pop it on my knee, and all I see is brown basically because they're that close, and I got a 9x scope. But there's no bulls. The bulls had taken off, and I'm just sitting there looking at these like 20-something cows and spikes, just hoping maybe one more bull will come in from somewhere. And I'm like, oh God, that was the dumbest. So I've never let my weapon, like if I have to go to the bathroom, taking my rifle, my bow, whatever it is with me. No matter what I do now, my weapon is with arm's reach, and it has to be because you only have to make that mistake once, right?
No, I get it, man. I kicking myself because I could have literally just taken my bow if I didn't want to like carry both my bow and my rifle. With the Oregon, it's any legal weapon. So my bow is perfectly legal to shoot that elk with if I were to see an elk. So
yep. Yeah, Well,
but
lesson learned, right? The best lessons are self-taught.
Right. Honestly, none of that would have mattered. One of my other stories here is it's kind of more about my brother, and how, I mean, he messed up one of my hunts. So a little
Okay.
bit about
Let's
my.
ask this. Do you want to dive into that one first, or the one I think you said you wanted to maybe start with the first story ever with your dad when you were like 5 or whatever? So you
Oh
pick,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. I can
let's
do
set
that.
the stage. What story? What are you hunting? Who you with? And then just dive into it, man.
We'll get into it. So I was, I mean, I was about 5 years old, and I've hunted with my dad since I could, walk pretty much. He'd take me out, and I remember vividly that year. It was opening morning, and the way it was back then is, you know, uh, I think bow season ended on a Wednesday. That
Yeah.
following Saturday, rifle season opener. So, um, I had we were ready to go. It was opening morning. I was pumped. I was 5. I'd been hunting with him for a couple years now. And I remember we're out in the woods. We get out there. We park our trucks. We park them at the same spot.
Okay.
It's this little chunk of private property ish. It's owned by the HOA, I guess it is, that he lives in. And it's a nice chunk of land, but not massive deer out there, but plenty of deer nonetheless.
Okay.
So park our trucks at the top of the field. That's that same field from the previous story. That field's in most of my stories. Um,
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
so so we parked our truck, and my dad. I just remember him. We hop out of the truck, and he grabs his gun and slings it over his shoulder, and you hear this clink. You're like, what the hell was that? So he's like, didn't think nothing of it, right? And so we meander on. My grandpa sits at the top of the field. He just stays there. Yeah, that's what he does. He'll sit, park at the top of the field, and just watch the field.
Yeah.
That was his deal. So we started taking off, and it's a lot of spot and stock. We sit, walk for a while, sit for a while, walk for a while, sit for a while. Just keeping an eye open. Deer everywhere up there. There's no real patterning them. They kind of
Okay.
just kind of go everywhere. Same general areas, but not so much as a pattern.
Okay.
So gonna sit for a while, and then as the day goes on, as the morning goes on, he bring his rifle down, off his shoulder, and hold it a different way, and he go clink. And he's like, what is going on? He checks his scope, checks his trigger, checks, every little thing, his bolt, just to see if it's like loose. What is making that clinking sound? Right. Later we walk a little bit, and he puts it back up on his shoulder, clink. And he's like, God, what the hell? And so he takes it off, and he's looking at it, and it's one of those top load 243s is what he hunts deer with.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
Lever, bolt action. And he looks at it, he starts looking closer, because it's just now getting lighter, where he can really see it. And he ended up grabbing his 338, his elk rifle, but he loaded it with his 243 bolt.
Oh.
So he's like, well, shit. So like we meander on back. We're like, he's like, well, I got to go back to the truck and figure this out. And so we start going back to the truck. We're walking.
Glad he
and
figured it out before he fired it,
Mosley.
right?
Well, yeah, well, here's
wow. Am I jumping the gun here? Okay, go ahead.
Jumping the gun a little bit. So we start walking, and all of a sudden, like, I'm walking behind him. I'm 5. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. Don't have a clue where we're at, stuff like that. All I know is we've been walking for a while, and I'm, 5 years old, bored, dragging my feet. And he keeps yelling at me, just stop dragging your feet, pick up your feet. And I'm like, all right. 10 minutes later, pick up your feet, So I'm like, okay, all right. And all of a sudden he just stops. He's looking, and I peek my head out from behind him, like, what's going on over there, right? And all I see is like brush and trees and nothing else. I don't know what he's looking at. So I'm like, all right, just sit there, twiddle my thumbs, and I could just hear him mutter, "Ah, shit." And so he takes his gun off his shoulder, he pulls it up, and next thing I know, he takes his shot.
No way.
And I'm like, what is it? What'd you get? I'm just yelling at this point. And he's like, oh, it's right over there. So I take off running in the direction that I know he shot. I don't see what's going on. And as I get closer, I see the horns. I see the deer. I run up on it, and I'm looking. I turn around. He's moseying behind me, head down, just irritated. And I get up there. It's a nice buck, nice big fork, 2x3, and
Is this I just gotta ask.
Mule deer, right? Mule deer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I look at this deer, and right on the stomach, on the side, looks like just a little bit of his guts were hanging out. And it dumbfounded me. I was like, Dad, you shot the guts out of this thing. He walks up and he head down. He's like, I didn't want to shoot it, but the thing was going to die anyway. Apparently a bow hunter had shot and grazed the stomach, and the guts just started hanging out. So, he knew. He's like, I didn't want to shoot the 243 bullets in my 338, but that deer was going to die anyway. So he's like, I might as well shoot it. It was just one of those things, one of those conundrums.
I'm amazed that gun worked, like, with the wrong ammo in there. That's
right.
That's a recipe for disaster or nothing, right? I wouldn't expect a clean fire.
But, that was one of my first memories. And I was so excited because that's the first time I could remember him getting a deer with me there. I didn't hunt every day with him, but it always seemed that he'd get a deer on the day I didn't go with him.
Yeah.
And I asked him about that, and he's like, well, I wonder why that is. I don't know. Playing it's because I fiddle around and can't stay still. And, but God bless my dad. He's an amazing man. He just put up with me, take me out at 3, 4, or 5 years old,
Yeah. That's funny, man. That's funny. This is an episode, a quote from an episode that came out 2 episodes before this one but isn't out yet as we're recording this.
Right.
But the guy's hunting with his dad, and he shoots a turkey, and he's like, God, I can't wait till next year. He's like, you're going to be 18, and I don't have to hunt with your ass anymore.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, there's something that's said about a good dad who just hunts their kid, even though it doesn't necessarily help them hunt. So,
right, yeah.
But that's a great story, man. I did not see that coming, and it's a pretty awesome, first hunting memory.
Oh, it is. And it's one of those things. And I ended up taking those horns, and I had them, when I was older, and I found those horns. I had them mounted, and I think he still has them. I mean, I think they're sitting in his garage somewhere, but he's still got them.
That's awesome, man. That's a great story. Well, I took you away from your brother's story. Do you want to dive into that one next, or is there more to this story that I'm cutting?
No, that's about it for that story. Other than, it's just it was just a good story with my dad. I did a lot of hunting with him. I never got anything with him, mostly when I was a kid. But this last year, so I had just moved back to Oregon. I convinced my brothers. I said, hunt with me. They'd never been hunting before. They the most they've been hunting is my older brother. When we'd go elk hunting, I have a story about that, but he'd ride around in the truck with me and my dad when we'd pick up hunters and stuff like that. So, but that's a whole nother little funny story later about him. But he had never been hunting before. My younger brother never really been hunting. I'm pretty much the only one in my of my brothers that has. And I got back, and that was my goal. I said, I'm going to get you guys into hunting, So we put in for tags, and I was like, we're going to put in for simple tags. I know we can get, archery deer and this elk tag that I know we can drop, which is that same elk tag. The elk season starts before deer season, so we had been out hunting pretty good with hunting elk with our rifles, and then we got the archery deer coming up. So it's opening morning, right? I'm feeling pumped. I'm ready to go. My brother, it's just one of my brothers there. My other brother, he had to work. He couldn't make it.
Okay.
So I said, all right, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to this spot. right? Like the deer somewhere along this corridor next to this, butts up against this other private property. They'll come from the fields and pop this fence. So just kind of sit on this fence line, just off of it, sit there and watch, just wait. Like they'll be coming through, at some point they'll come through. And he's like, all right, yeah, I got it. Like, I'm going to go up this way around the meadow, same meadow. I'm going to get to the bottom of it so I can kind of see the meadow. Right. So I send him on his way. I get going. I make my way up and around. Finally, I'm sitting at the meadow just after light. I mean, it's about 30 minutes after shoot light,
Okay.
So
yeah,
about sunrise. I'm sitting there and I'm kind of just looking around. And out of the corner of my eye, I catch movement up at the top of the meadow. Mind you, we park our trucks up at the top of the meadow. It's a really long meadow. I mean, it's a good 400 or 500 yards to the middle of the meadow / end of the meadow, because it kind of keeps going, but it wraps around.
Okay, got it.
A little point in the trees. So from where you can see the top and the bottom, which is what I call the bottom usually, it's about a good 500 yards to the top. So I catch movement out of the corner of my eye. I'm sitting down there. And so I look up and I just see a bunch of deer. I can't tell what anything is. I forgot my binocular, so I couldn't see what. Yeah, I left it at home, completely left it.
Yeah.
Didn't even pack it in my hunting pack. So I look up there, I see deer. I'm like, all right, usually if there's does, there's at least a spike in there with them, and I'm an equal opportunity hunter. I'm going to take the first legal thing that pops up.
Yeah.
So I start making my way. There's few scattered trees and tall grass in this meadow. So I'm making my way all the way up, crawling through this grass. Deer have no clue I'm there. I get within about 150 yards. So then I can pull out my rangefinder. It's about all I had. I pull out my rangefinder so I can see them a little bit better. Doe, 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 about 8 does. And then finally I look and it pops out of the bush and it's just a little 3-inch spiked horn popping up. And I'm like,
just enough.
I get all jittery, I'm ready to go at that point. I'm like, all right, calm down. So yeah, I mean, I'm barely seeing it. Like, it's through my rangefinder, and I don't have the best rangefinder. I got a $100 rangefinder from Bass Pro Shop. And so I see this thing, and I get all excited, and I'm like, all right, calm down. I got to get over there. I'm about 150 yards, and at this point, I'm comfortable probably to about 60 with my bow at that point in time. I've shot a lot more. I'm probably comfortable out to about 80 now, but so I got to close this gap, more than halfway. And there's no more trees. There's no more cover. Just a little tall grass. 1 or 2 small scraggly bushes that I can kind of get behind, get low, and they might not be able to see me. So I start crawling, right? Occasionally stopping, looking up, ranging, head back down, crawl, army crawl. I get to about 80 yards. I look up to find them again, range them, and they're kind of getting a little jumpy. I can see that, but they're not looking at me. They're looking up behind me towards the trucks. Just turning their head, feeding, just kind of like on edge. You could tell they're uneasy about something up there, but they're not sure what yet. So
gotcha.
So I'm like, all right, I got to close the distance a little more. As soon as I like put my head back down, next thing I hear is my truck door slam.
Oh no.
And I'm like, no. And so I'm like, all right, well, let's see if I can get to him. I got 20 yards to cover, hopefully before whatever's up there spooks him. I'm 90% sure it's my brother, but I'm hoping he just, whatever he needed in the truck, he got, and then went back the other direction. Well, so I start to climb, just creep myself a little closer. I'm taking less time as I come up in range. So get a little closer, range them. I'm like 90 yards, or not 90, 70, right? And I'm like, all right, I'm so close, so close. I'm ready. I'm gonna fill my tag this year. No tag soup for me. So I'm crawling. I look up, and they're taking off, just out of there, gone, right? And at this point, I'm so mad, so heated. So I stand up and I look up, and all I see is my brother, and he's like 6'2", 6'3". He's a big boy.
Yeah.
Just bow in hand, walking straight down the field, not crawling, not nothing, just walking from the truck straight towards him, bow in hand. Like,
did he see them, or was he just oblivious and trying to get back to a spot? Like,
no, because
I'm probably getting ahead here. You go ahead.
No, you're good. His spot was the opposite direction, right? So at this point, I'm so mad. I'm like heated. I'm so pissed off. And so I call him on my phone, and at this point, I'm lucky he didn't pick up. So I probably would have said some things I didn't mean. I had shed my clothes about 100 yards behind me, my jacket and my pack and everything. And so he didn't answer, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Went back, walked down, grabbed my pack, grabbed my coat, start walking back towards him. Finally, I'm telling myself, you know what? It's fine. He's new. This is his first year. Like, this is, my fault too. I should have told him, if you see deer in this field, stay put. Don't do anything, because this is where I'm
hunting. And try and pet them.
Right. This isn't the safari that we have here in Oregon, where you can just walk out with your hand and feed them. So I finally get over to him. I'm like, man, I was 10 yards from pulling my bow. And he's like, man, I'm sorry. I just saw the deer. And I was like, wow, those are cool. I'm going to walk towards it, see if I can get close enough. And he's like, I thought you were way at the other end of the field. And I'm like, yeah, well, I was. So I saw the deer. And I was like, I thought you were down there by the fence. He's like, yeah, man, I got hot and had to drop my jacket off.
Oh my goodness. Just take it off and set it next to you.
Well, my brother, God, I love him, right?
Yeah.
But he's ADHD, very can't sit still. He's got to be moving. So my fault for thinking he could stay in one spot for a whole
and
hunt.
we've all done something where we're like, you know what, I probably shouldn't have done it the way that I did it. So it's not,
right.
Exactly. In retrospect, it's a funny story rather than at the time. I bet you, God, I can't imagine how heated you were.
No, I was so mad. And I'd never, I've the only thing I've taken with my bow is pigs, in Georgia. Because it just seemed like every time in Georgia, if I was out deer hunting, I took my rifle, just because, I'm putting meat in the freezer first,
Right. Yeah.
So, but man,
awesome,
it was,
man.
I was so mad.
That's frustrating.
Wound is still a little open, it hasn't
and that
quite
was just last year,
yet.
Last season.
Yeah, this was last season, opening day. I didn't get out to hunt much after that, but I didn't see anything else after that besides that one buck where I didn't even have my bow.
Yeah. Did or does your brother plan on hunting with you again this coming season? Was he like,
yes.
Is he into it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Both my brothers fell in love with it. I ended up, before the season even started, we were shooting my bow. I had my bow. It's an old, I don't even know what year it was. It didn't have any markings. I bought it from a pawn shop because it was, and believe it or not, that was an upgrade from my first bow.
Wow.
So I got my first bow when I was like 14, first compound bow, right? First year trying to hunt with it, I was like 14. My dad was like, good luck. He never bow hunted. I didn't know nothing about it. I went and visited my cousin and my uncle who bow hunted up in the valley here in Oregon. And I come back and said, Dad, I want to try it. Like, I want to get my own bow. And so he had a buddy that had this old, it had to be 80s compound bow. Like, it didn't even have a cam. It was just two pulleys, awesome. Old, the metal pin sight, no peep sight.
That's
it was
awesome.
Terrible. It was a terrible.
And so that was not the one that you were shooting with then. This was the one before you upgraded.
Yeah. So that was my very first bow.
Okay.
I took that to Georgia with.
Do you still have both of those bows?
So that first bow I do not. I gave it to a buddy when I moved to Georgia in the Army. First thing I did was went to a pawn shop and bought another upgraded, but still, I mean, it had to be like late 90s, early 2000s Martin bow,
Yeah.
the one cam. It was nice. And I had that for a good 8-9 years. Literally last year, we're out there shooting, and my brother's like, man, I want to get a bow. And I was like, you know what? You could have this bow. And I went and bought myself a new bow.
Good for you, man.
So
Good for you.
he uses that one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, cool. Well, that was, I mean, it's an infuriating story, but it is a good story. It's got a great ending because now you got a hunting buddy, and hopefully he learned that lesson. Hopefully you had that heart to heart with him. But
oh yeah, I mean, we talked about it. We still joke about it, but I mean, deep down inside, it still hurts a little bit.
I bet, man. I bet. So, what other stories you got for us? I know you said you had a funny, short, quick one from the other brother, but if there's any other ones you have in mind, let's keep going. This is great.
Yeah. What was? So, let me look at my list real quick. You still there?
Yeah, man. I'm still here.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were still there while I look at my list. Like I said, first. All right, so I got kind of a funny one. It was my first hog, in Georgia, and so mind you, I'm from here. Like I said, I spot and stock. Walk, sit.
Yeah.
Find the deer, move into position, take the shot. Right. That was about all I knew. So I moved over to Georgia, and I remember I was just itching to get out there and hunt. Right. So I was like, you know what? It's deer season. I bought my hunting license. And in Georgia, you buy your hunting license and you get 7 tags, like automatically. 2 buck tags, 5 doe tags. So I'm like, I'm getting out there, right? Like I'm going. I got my old 30-30 lever action. Was handed down to me from my great uncle. Been in the family for years. Old Model 94, amazing gun.
That's
I
awesome.
still have it.
That's awesome.
I love it. But that was my hunt. That was my gun of choice over in Georgia. That's all I had for years. But it was a perfect gun over there because it's all swamp. It's all close, brushy swamp. Palmetto bushes, stuff like that. So I get out there. I'm in the woods, and I'm not a clue what I'm doing to be hunting, whitetail. So traipsing through this swamp, just trying to be as quiet as possible, walking through. Right. And so I'm walking. I'm a good 3-4 miles from my truck. Right. And I'm thinking small Georgia whitetail swamp deer, a little bit bigger than a German Shepherd. I can put the whole thing in my pack it out, be done.
Yeah.
So I'm walking through, and I get behind these palmetto bushes, and I start to hear some rustling. I can tell it's an animal walking. Right. So I'm like, oh, here it is. I'm ready. I'm super ready to shoot my first deer, my first whitetail deer. So I just kind of sit. Right. And I can hear it. And I'm like, it's going to come out right in front of these bushes, 10 yards from me. I'm going to smoke this thing. Well, I hear it coming, working its way around this bush, slowly but surely, crunching through the leaves, the brush, the swamp, the water. And all of a sudden, I know it's right now, it's about to step out. And so I'm getting ready to look, and all I see is this black, massive blob step out. And it's this giant boar. And he looks at me, and I'm in shock because I'm ready for a deer. I didn't even think about pigs. I'm ready for this deer to pop out. And so he looks at me. I look at him, and in a shock, I was like, oh, I can shoot that thing. So I pull up my gun as fast as I can, and he starts to go take off, and I shoot, and he drops kind of half down. He's running away from me, so I shot him right in the ass pretty much. And he drops his ass in, and he's sitting there, just squealing away. And I'm like, oh, what did I do? So I'm like, all right, I pull up and I shoot it, right behind the ear where you shoot hogs most of the time. And he drops, he's dead. I'm like 4 miles from my truck. I have to drag this pig out of this swamp for 4 miles.
How big
Like,
is this pig? I
I
know you
mean,
said it was
I
huge,
didn't
but
get a
like,
weight on him, but he is up until this last week, where I went down to Texas and did that hog hunt. He was the biggest pig I ever shot.
yeah,
He was easily 160, 200 pounds.
okay,
Just
that's a pretty
just
big pig.
just a dense boar. Just had good sized cutters and a massive stinky body, just gross.
Yeah, they are
But I'm
pretty
like,
disgusting. I
hey
can't
man,
even
I was
imagine what a
excited. I was
swamp pig would be
pumped.
like. Yeah, I bet, man. I bet. But yeah, I was saying I've seen some Texas pigs where they're it's dry. It can be a little wet, but really nothing swampy. But God, I can't
Right.
even imagine a pig out of a swamp. Gross.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, how am I gonna get this massive pig back to my truck? Right. I don't have a pack that holds a lot of meat, because I'm thinking, I'm gonna gut this deer and like make a backpack out of the deer and just put it on my back and head out. These deer are like 100 pounds max.
Yeah.
Um I ended up having this it's 550 cord is what we called it in the military. Paracord pretty much. And I cut the slits in his feet there, and right behind the tendons where you'd go to hang them anyway, run it through both legs and tie it. And then I tie it around my waist, and I'm running on adrenaline at this point. So I'm like, oh, this ain't that bad. I start dragging, and then the adrenaline wears off. The tired comes in. His cutters are grabbing every root on the way, every little stump, every root. His teeth are like grabbing it. And I'm like, all right, I got to do something else. So I turn it around, and I'm probably not the smartest guy, but I'm like, all right, the farther away I have the pig from me, the easier it might be. Right. That was my thought process. I'm not thinking clearly, knowing that like if I would have tied it up right next to my hip, I would only had to drag half of it. Only
Yeah.
half of the pig would be on the ground. No, that's not what I thought. I'm sitting there like, all right, the whole pig is way back there. It should be easy. And I'm sitting there trudging through these swamps. It took me hours to get that pig back to my truck. And I say truck lightly. It was an SUV. I had a Cadillac. I didn't have a tarp. So this pig had to literally I had to lay my seat down and put this pig in the back of my Cadillac. Old not a super fancy Cadillac, but nonetheless, it was not a car I should be throwing dead animals in the back of. But that wasn't running through my mind.
Yeah.
Finally, get to Fort Stewart, Georgia. Had this nice skinning shack where I could go clean this thing up. But I was, by the end of cleaning it all up, and I put it in a cooler. I'm like, I'm not dealing with that pig. Went and got ice, put it on ice, and it sat in that cooler. I just rotated the ice for like a week. Just draining the blood water out until the water was clear, and then I cut it up. I'm gonna put most of it into sausage,
Gotcha.
but I ate the
Was it
heart
tasty? Go ahead.
that morning. I ate the heart for breakfast. I got back and cleaned up the heart and had that for breakfast. That's an old tradition my dad and I had growing up deer hunting.
That's awesome.
If you get a deer in the morning, that heart's breakfast. Put that with some eggs, and you make some gravy out of the leftovers in the pan, flour, milk, stuff like that. Make some gravy and smother everything in the gravy, and that's
that
breakfast.
Awesome. That
No,
sounds
it's
awesome.
amazing, dude. I actually have a pig heart. I'm about to do it this weekend.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I have some buddies that like whenever they shoot anything, they typically eat the heart, but they'll have like potatoes, onions, and heart. But I've never actually gotten to participate in that because we've always had heart shots that just like blew up the hearts since I've started hunting.
Yeah.
But that's the typical plan. That being said, in lieu of a heart, we'll have backstrap and potatoes and onions, which is not it's a damn fine meal if you ask me. So Gunner, man, that's What are the like? Did it taste funny like the pig? I just don't know what they're eating in a swamp. Was it good eating?
They're eating literally like anything they can find,
Yeah.
roots, just anything. The heart, you put enough seasonings on it, you're not going to taste much gamey meat anyway. It's more just like a texture, and you can make it really good. But um, and it was an old trick that one of my buddies down there he taught me when I was talking to him about wanting to hunt pigs. He's like, "Yeah, man, put them in a cooler." And what you do is you put down meat and then a layer of ice, and then meat and then a layer of ice, and then you pretty much just add ice to that cooler and drain out the water as it goes, and don't cut up that pig until that water comes out clear. Once that water comes out clear, it's pretty much like curing that meat, and so it takes a lot of that gamey taste out of it. I mean, you still get it just like a regular wild animal. You're going to get a little bit, but it's toned down quite a bit. I've yet to try this Texas hog, so maybe I'll have to tell you the comparison when I get done with that.
Can't wait, man. Can't wait. I actually have about 40 pounds of Texas hog waiting for me at a butcher. I just got to get up and get it.
Yeah,
can't wait.
I'm sitting here procrastinating. Got to cut up the rest of it. I cut up about 2 pigs worth last night. And then I have still one more pig worth I got to cut. I'm just cutting the whole thing up into chunks and gonna grind it up into sausage.
That's awesome.
Except for the back straps, obviously those are going whole on the smoke.
Loins. That's awesome. Yeah, we shot a pig on a hunt. Actually, I didn't. A buddy of mine did, and he shot it, and I didn't think I even had any meat. But he lives in North Carolina, and the cost of getting the pig to him is just so crazy that he's like, yeah, if anybody else wants some. So he actually shot a 300-pound hog. It was massive. It took 4 of us to get it up into the back of the side by side. So
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. But
I think the biggest pig out there that we shot this last week was, it had to be right around, I didn't measure it because it was, we got done at 3:00 in the morning from our thermal night hunts.
Yeah.
And we had 4 pigs to take care of. So, I weighed the first one. It weighed in at 167 pounds. And that was not the biggest, but not the smallest, about the middle of the pack there. The biggest one probably had to be around 200 pounds.
Yeah. It gets pretty big out there. So.
Yeah.
But Gunnar, what else you got for it? You got any more stories, or is that what you have on your list? Because I'm not going to stop you.
I got a couple more on my list there. I don't know how long they'll be, but so right before I joined the military, I really wanted to go elk hunting, right?
Yeah.
But elk season, I didn't put in for tags because I was leaving, so it was more of a last second thought. And then in Western Oregon, at the time, you could buy a Western Oregon over-the-counter tag for rifle, but I wasn't going to be there, so I didn't think about it, and I didn't know anybody over there, to plan for it. So I didn't do it, and I was leaving in October. I didn't put in for tags because my normal elk season that my dad hunted was in November. So I was kind of bummed, and I really wanted to go. And I had a buddy who hunted elk with his bow over in Western Oregon. And I'm like,
okay.
And he was telling me the seasons, and it was, shortly after I graduated, before I was leaving for basic. So I was like, man, I'm in, let's do it. So I know nothing about the area, nothing about archery hunting elk, but very little about archery hunting in general. I knew I can hit a target out to about 40 yards with that old bow that I think is from the 80s. I don't even know. It didn't have any markings on it.
Yeah.
It was spray painted camouflage by the time I got it. Aluminum arrows and finger draw. No D-loop, nothing. Just old. But I had that bow, and it was set at like 60 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was comfortable probably out to about 40 yards with it. That was my max, like absolute max. And like that was my last pin. I had 4 pins, 10, 20, 30, 40. And so I'm like, let's do it, man. Let's go. I'm ready. right? So I get out there. I only have the weekend to hunt with him. I get out there on a Friday. I get up there to his house, and he still has to get off work. So I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs all day Friday, waiting for him to get off work, hanging out at his house. It's my cousin's husband. And so I'm sitting there patiently, anxiously waiting. Finally, he gets off work. We get up, get in the truck, drive out to the camp spot, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, man, we're in like a campground looking place. There's other campers out here, and I'm like, what are we doing? He's like, yeah, man, we walk these trails, and the elk are, they're out here, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, if you say so, dude. I mean, I'll walk with you. I was very skeptical at that point. First morning comes, Saturday morning comes. We walk around what feels like forever. Mind you, I'm an 18-year-old kid. Seems like forever, and we see nothing. I didn't see a bit of sign, a bit of anything. And, I'm used to, when I go elk hunting with my dad, we're out in the woods. There's no roads. There's no trails where we are. We're in the middle of the woods. And we're walking these roads pretty much, just trails, four-wheeler trails. And I was like, man, why don't we, go through the woods? He's like, man, you'd scare everything within 100 yards, 200 yards just trying to crunch through this brush. It's all brushy out there. So you have to stay on the trails. I'm like, all right, so we do that. That first morning goes. I didn't see nothing. Evening comes along, and I'm like, I'm going to walk, the same way we walked this morning, because it's the only way that I knew. It's the only area I knew. He's like, all right, I'm going to go up this way and walk this other way. So I'm like, all right. So I do my hunt, and I see nothing again.
Yeah.
And then, when we get back to the camp, he's like, yeah, man, I missed a nice a cow. I'm like, damn it, man. Like, I didn't even see any elk. I wanted to see some elk, At this point, I had seen elk in the wild, I think, twice, and though that reminds me of the other story. Remind me about the other story with my brother, the short, funny one. I remember what it is now.
Okay.
So I'm like, I'm pissed at this point. Like, I was hoping to see an elk. I only have one more day, half a day really, because I got to leave Sunday afternoon and go home. So the next morning, he's like, all right, I got a new area we're going to go. He's like, so we get in the truck, we get out to this spot, and there's a road that goes up a hill, and then the main road wraps around it. Right. So, it's not very long. It's not a big area. It's just where we were going to look that morning and then go somewhere else. So he drops me off at the bottom of the hill. He's like, walk the road up, and I'll drive around to the top side and walk, and we'll meet you in the middle, and I'll, then we'll walk back to the truck. I'm like, all right, cool. So I get out, and I'm just kind of dinking around. I'm not actually doing nothing, not actually hunting, irritated at this point. And so I start walking up this stupid hill. It's pretty steep. It's not like crazy, but steep, right? And so I get up past the level of bushes, about 2 minutes into my walk, dinking around, and I see this elk just walk by. And I'm like, shit. So I drop straight to the ground. I'm like, I don't know what to do at this point because I am clueless, And so I peek my head back up. They don't know I'm there. And I have no clue. I don't have a rangefinder. I don't know how far I was. I was okay at guesstimating yards, right? Like, I'd shot my bow at that specific bow enough to know roughly where I'm at.
Okay.
But I'm like way away from them. I'm not, anywhere near shooting. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, I have no clue what to do. So I get on my stomach. I have an arrow knocked, bow in one hand, and I'm just army crawling, up this road because they're just off the road. Yeah. And I get up there a little ways, and I'm like, okay, there's about 8 cows and 1 spike. And, I could take whatever. It's 1 elk, was what my tag was. I'm like, all right. I'm going to shoot that spike. I want these horns. So I get up and I probably get 45, 50 yards before I get up close to it. They still don't know I'm there. Like, I'm pretty sneaky. And so, like, I get up and I'm like, all right, get ready. I got my the little leather finger things, for your finger draw bow. I make sure those are in the right position so I don't, so I'm comfortable. And I breathe for a little bit, and I go to, as soon as I go to draw my bow, all I hear is, it sounds like a stump rolling down a hill. This cow comes over the hill and just starts tearing off. Takes the whole herd with it. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do at this point. I'm just pissed.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if it was me. All I know is, like, I don't know how far my buddy was. I don't know how long this road is. So at this point, I'm just irritated. It seems like a thing for me. So I'm like,
right? It's common thread.
I knock my arrow and I just start walking down this road. And my buddy, I get to the end of the road, ends up being me. It's my fault. Like, the elk probably spotted me or scented me. Like, I didn't know anything about wind.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Thermals,
right?
all
Like,
that
I knew
stuff.
nothing about archery hunting elk. So I I get up to the end of the road, and my buddy, he's like, yeah, I wasn't even gonna walk down the road. I was just gonna sit here and wait for you, And I was like, yeah, dude, I just spooked a whole herd of elk. He's like, no shit. And so we, like, get up in the truck, and I was like, where'd they go? And I tore off that way. And so we took the road back around, tried to find where they crossed, look for the tracks. He's like, oh yeah, they're all, this is where they crossed, but there's nothing over there. You're limited literally to the roads, walking the trails and roads. So there was no trails in that area, but that was my first elk hunting experience by myself.
Yeah, man, my first elk hunting was basically just same thing. Walking old logging roads, no idea what I'm doing, wearing like super baggy pants. Like, I was like MC Hammer style camo pants, like, just no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what thermals were until like my third or fourth year of actually elk hunting. And I've taken out the guys that took me out, because we were hunting in Washington, taking them out in Colorado, and discovered that they still don't know what thermals are. And I gave one of them a wind checker, because the closest I've ever been to killing an elk with my bow, that he got winded by my buddy, and the whole herd got up and ran away. So it's just,
Yeah, I still don't have a wind checker.
Oh, come on, Gunner.
Use the old throw up some grass. Yep, the wind's headed that way.
Yeah, that's better than nothing. At least you're doing something.
Right. I'm a very stingy when it comes to buying stuff, and I need to not be. I know I need to get the right equipment to be successful.
Yeah. Gunner, I'll send you a wind checker. There can't be much more than like $3 or $4. So
I know.
I'll send you one, man.
I get in the store and I see it, and I'm like, oh, I need to get one of those. I'll get it later, and then I just don't get it later.
Man, I've had one in my bino harness for like 5 years. I don't know when it will ever run out. It's just one of those things that, like, just constantly stays at the same level. I mean, you're putting a poof of powder, and it's 2 ounces of powder. You'll never run out of it. So,
right.
By the way, I don't want you to forget. Hopefully, you can remember the story. But your brother and elk, the little quick short.
Oh yeah, okay.
And maybe we'll wrap it on this one.
All right. So we are young, right? I can't remember how old I was. It's me. And my 2 older brothers, and we're in the truck with my dad.
Yeah.
At this point, there's a truck behind us. We had just picked up all the hunters from where they got dropped off at, and then they walked down to, the road, and we picked them up, whatever. So we're headed back to camp. All the hunters are in these 2 trucks, and, there's still some daylight left. And so me and my brothers are talking about, oh man, what if we saw a coyote? I'd shoot it. I got my 22 right here in the back seat, and what if we saw a bear or cougar? We're just talking. My dad turns over. He's like, we're here for elk. We're not here for coyotes, bear, cougar. He's very serious. And so we're like, all right. And then, a couple minutes later, my older brother, the same one from the earlier story, he's looking out the window. He's like, well, there's the coyote. And we look over, and my dad slams on the brakes, just hammers the brakes. And I look out the window and I just see these two just massive bulls walking, just right next to the road, like we weren't even there. He hops out the truck and he grabs his gun, hops out the truck and throws himself onto the side of the road, and we're all sitting in there like, what's going on, and all the hunters are out of their trucks and just seeing they had cow tags, so they didn't, they were just hoping those bulls had some cows with them. But man, he got back in the truck and he's like, just breathing as hard as he could. And he's like, that. He's like, do you know what a coyote looks like? My brother's like, no, I just saw animals. I was like, I thought that was a coyote. I didn't know. And so we just started cracking up, and I'd still give him shit to this day for that.
Oh, I would, man. I would. He thinks a coyote, a branched antler bull is a coyote. I've never
massive. Like I swear it's and I don't have a whole lot of experience with the biggest bull I've seen in the wild, ever. I can remember. I still picture it in my mind. I'm like, that's one of these days I'm going to shoot one of those elk.
That's amazing, man. That's a great story. Your brother deserves to have shit, thrown his way for the rest of his life.
I love that.
I don't care how much of a hunter or just average Joe you are that doesn't hunt at all. You should know the difference between an elk and a coyote, especially when you're in a truck of elk hunters.
Right. No, I mean, granted, we were probably, I think, I was probably 6 or 7, and he's about 3 years older than I am, so he's probably 10 or 11.
Man, yeah. You know what? I'm gonna show slides to my 3-year-old. Excuse me, he's 4 now. My 4-year-old. I'm gonna be like, which one's a coyote, which one's an elk.
Right.
And I know but that being said, I've been training him with elk noises for a long time. Right. So he was, but that's funny, man. Gunner, this has been fun, but why don't we'll wrap up on that one because I don't think you can beat it.
No.
Yeah. Why don't we tell the people where they can find you if they're interested in checking out what you're up to, and then we'll walk off into the sunset here, bud.
All right, cool. Yeah. So I just started getting into this whole video and everything sort of thing. So my brothers and I thought about how average we did everything, so I was like, wouldn't it be cool to start a channel, Average Bros Outdoors, and so I did. I started in Instagram. You can find me at Average Bros Outdoors, all lowercase, all one word. I have a YouTube channel, same thing, and also on TikTok. You can find me there. I have a
TikTok.
I don't have a whole lot of content posted yet. I'm still working on it. Like I said, I need to get out more and do more outdoor stuff than just filming my hunts during hunting season. But that being said, I do have a little bit of content, and then I'm about to get my thermal footage back from my Texas hog hunt. So I'm going to make the whole hunting video on YouTube. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. And I'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes. The only advice I have for you, man, is don't let the videography, the videotaping everything, take away from the fun of actually being in the woods. I've tried to do some of that stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. Nope, I just want to hunt. Like, it's not for me. I'll podcast. So just make sure you still enjoy hunting for what it is, while also doing that, man. But otherwise, good luck. Good luck, man.
No, yeah. I mean, when I was down in Texas, I loved having the camera in the tree stand with me. That's cool. It made it so much cooler. And I got some good footage. I didn't have any pigs come into my tree stand, but I had, deer, elk, a duck, a snake. Yeah, seriously. I was right next to a little creek and a little wood duck.
The Holy Trinity, the deer, elk, and ducks.
Right. So, no, horses, not elks. I'm sorry. Yeah. I had horses come in.
Okay.
I wish I had an elk come in. That would have been cool, but we're in Texas.
You could have shot it, man. You could have shot it. They're in Texas. There are some free roaming elk.
They're exotics in Texas, but no, they were horses for sure. Not elks. I was just thinking about elk in my head.
That's all right.
I'm ready for elk season. So
me too, man. I just drew my tag. I've been saving. It's the first time I've ever drawn a limited entry tag in Colorado, so I'm pretty
Oh,
fired
man.
up. So hopefully I have
So
some good stories for everyone when I get out there in September.
I won't
But
I
Gunnar,
won't find out my draw until the 12th of June.
okay,
So
that's soon enough. That's a week away, man. You'll know in
right.
no time. But man, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for reaching out. Like I said, my favorite people I've talked to are the average bros, Joes, folks out there that have their own hunting stories that aren't the 700-inch bulls. So thank
Right.
you again, buddy. I appreciate
Of
it.
course. I had a blast. Thank you.
All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Gunnar, of course, for one, being brave and reaching out and coming on this podcast and telling us your stories, man. I really do appreciate it. I often say that some of my favorite stories are from the listeners, the average Joe hunter that reaches out and has some great stories to tell. And that was a plug there, right? Because we got Gunnar. Make sure you follow him on Instagram at Average Bros Outdoors. From there, you can check out his YouTube, etc. Also, everything's in the show notes. So I put links to all that stuff there. Feel free to click and kind of check out what he's up to. But again, Gunnar, man, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. To you listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. Now go out there again and, of course, share the podcast so that we can get other listeners like Gunnar to reach out and tell us some of their stories. And then beyond that, guys, thank you again. I appreciate it. And now go ahead and get out there and make some stories of your own.